Okay, so welcome to Vantage Point Conversation. So welcome to my audience. So those watching live and those watching on the replay. My guest today is Joe Cooper. Joe, I'm saying it right, Cooper, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, you got spot
Okay,
on.
fantastic. So I'm caffeinated this morning, so it's early time, my time. I guess it's quite late your time or
It's
afternoon time.
6:30,
There
6:30
we go.
p.m. in Sydney.
So,
Yeah, not too late.
hopefully I'll bring my energy up and we'll match each other's.
Yeah.
But Joe, I always say opening monologue is always the same. I don't introduce my guests because I think I would do a very bad job, um, even butchering the name sometimes. But if you could just take as long as you want, as little time as you want, whatever, anything that you think that people should know about you, highlights, lowlights, anything in between, anything you would
Oh,
like people to know about you, and then we just dive in and have fun from there.
dive in. Okay, I would introduce myself as somebody, well, I'm an artist advocate. I detest bullying and any form of harm against human beings. And I'm very, very passionate about ending bullying, abuse, and bystander inaction culture as far as humanly possible. I think that's the most important thing people need to know about me if they
Yeah.
care. I I am deemed controversial, which I totally disagree with. I just feel like I'm brutally honest, and I think that's something that's missing in life. So I would consider myself a bit of a disruptor and a change maker for the better, but people don't like change. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So I wanted to actually, it's a compliment to you, and I hope it lands. But so when, in the same way that I have all the conversations with people, I reach out to people via LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I'd been sort of following your stuff for a while. We'd had a sort of back and forth conversation, then we actually got to have a chat last week. And you never know what someone's going to be like when you get to speak to them, first of all. And I think
True.
um, I always try to remain open-minded with all these things. I think something that struck me, first of all, was I was expecting to have someone in front of me that was like, not just always wanted to have a conflict or something like that. And I was like, and then when I was like, wow, this is such a lovely person with such an amazing heart and really, um,
Oh, thank
really
you.
open. And I think we spoke for a long time. Normally, I
We
sort of say
did.
half an hour, and I'm sure it went on for a lot longer than that. And
We did.
I came away thinking, wow. And I was wondering, does that happen a lot to you? Do people misinterpret who you are and how
Completely.
you are? Okay.
Yeah, all the time. And it's something sadly I think I've grown used to. Uh,
Mm.
but I have put it down to being part of the cost of speaking up. So there's a cost to silence, and there's definitely a cost to speaking out. People don't like change. People don't, they say they want change. I don't think they understand what it takes to create change, regardless of the fact that we have such a rich history to learn from. I People don't, they either don't care or they don't pay attention, because I am astonished that the reaction to change is still the same. And so yes, I get called controversial most weeks. And
Wow.
it is by people who barely know me. Those who do know me know that I'm very empathetic. I take on people's feelings. I care so deeply that it makes me do what I do. And that is often overlooked because you, I don't think there's too many people out there. I hope I'm right in this, that seek conflict. I don't
Mm.
think people seek out to cause problems. However, I'm not a person who is going to sit back and watch an injustice just so others are comfortable. you
Yeah.
know, and when you are the person pointing out, hello, there's an issue over here, people don't like that. And so I think it's just easy for them to call you the problem rather than the actual
Yeah.
problem at hand. Yeah.
It's it's a lovely way to sort of not reframe it, but to, because I was thinking about our conversation, and there's a book, I think it's called Influence. Have you ever read it, by Robert Cialdini? I think it is. I may have butchered that name.
No,
And
no.
it was interesting. It was because we're going to talk about the bystander thing, and it was there was a story of someone being attacked in uh, I think it was like a housing estate or something like that, and no one came to the aid, and there was part of it's deeply psychological in terms of it's about how to influence people and understand how people's minds work and stuff like that. And there's a couple of things that stood out, but one of these is that someone was being attacked and someone else thought someone else would do something about it
Somebody
because no
else's
one else.
responsibility.
Yeah, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, and when you read that, and it's, I think it's good that that's not just a one-off. You can understand, okay, this happens, and when you understand that something happens, then you can do something about it, and you realize, okay, maybe this is something that's happening. You can go the other way and try and change something, and it suggested that if someone does something, it's not that person that changes it, it's the people behind that. And I remember seeing this amazing clip on YouTube, and it was like this festival. And I don't know what type of festival it was, or like in a big field, and it was a bit muddy. Sort of imagine sort of Glastonbury, Glastonbury
Okay,
sort of stuff.
yeah.
And
Burning Man.
yeah, and there was one guy, and he was dancing to the music, and he was dancing a bit crazy. Didn't seem to have a lot of rhythm, but it was a bit like, oh, and no one would go and dance. But then what happened is one other guy went and danced with him, and
And
this
then
guy,
others joined.
yeah, not just one, like the whole crowd. It was like this acceptance wave, and it's a very powerful moment when you go, oh, okay, it's very difficult to be that person, but it's really strange because that one person in front, almost people ignored him and they focused on the person that came, and I don't know what that is, if it's bravery or they just didn't care what other people thought of them, or that there was compassion to go and dance with this other person. But the first person almost got, no one sort of focused on him, but that whole permission to allow yourself to go and have fun and know that people weren't judging you, it's very, for me, it was very powerful just to see that, and it's something that sticks with you a lot when you, and yeah, when you think about situations like this, it definitely comes out.
People find safety in a crowd, in groups. So if you look at how people gravitate to certain circumstances or how they react in, that scenario you just played out, if this guy's sort of interpreting the music and just feeling it, and to him he's probably having the time of his life, and people looking at him going, you've got zero rhythm. He doesn't care. He's doing great. But he's one person, and it's the same things. It's one person. If that was a group of 10 or more people dancing in the exact same manner, people would just naturally join in and not even think about it. And it really comes down to this safety in numbers,
Mm,
which is a problem more than it's not. And that's probably a harmless scenario. Maybe not for the guy. Maybe he did feel great with somebody joining in, and it meant a lot, I'm sure. But we do have this group think mentality.
mm,
And I always say, stop outsourcing your thinking. You have to think for yourself. You can't rely on other people to do your thinking for you, regardless of how safe it is. And so that's why I always come back to, in my belief, bystanders, silent bystanders, are power brokers of change. I truly believe that.
Yeah. And is that because it's in numbers? Because um,
Yeah,
because I don't, yeah, I don't quite know how to frame it, but we can talk about maybe it's useful for the example that you gave me in real life that happened to you around the residency, and I think it's such a fascinating story, and the last part was amazing for me. The people that then came on your side. So, do you mind just? I think for the audience,
sure.
it's such a good
Yeah.
example. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So in 2015, I moved into the building I live in currently. We call it strata. I'm not sure if Americans, if English call it strata. It's apartment blocks.
Okay.
So units, is that what
Yeah.
you would call it? An
We
apartment?
just call it we just call it apartments. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Apartments. Okay. So they're called strata schemes in Australia.
Okay.
And so I moved in, I'll try and summarize it because it's a 6.5 year story. I asked a question about pets, and basically it was, why do we have a ban on pets when the building is full of pets? That was all I asked. Do, before I go on any further, do you find that an offensive question?
No. No. It's
It,
just
it,
yeah.
it's a
It's
question.
yeah. Yeah. I think you just want clarity out of that. It's just a question, right? And most
It's
questions
just a
are
question.
so you can understand something, right?
Yeah, it's I there was on my floor we had we had four pets. I didn't have my pet with me because I was informed before we settled that there were no pets allowed. And I didn't believe that because I knew people that had pets. I also, I saw the pets. It was very well known, not just in our building, but even in the community that there were pets here. So it puzzled me. And I thought I was doing the right thing. We moved in without Angus, was our miniature schnauzer. We have since lost him. So I thought this is a case of an outdated bylaw, nothing sinister. Let me see what the story is. At the next meeting, I will put forward a motion to change it, again, thinking it's outdated. And if we don't change it, and this really is a law, a rule, uh, we will still, we'll still keep the place and rent somewhere else. My God, that was not how it played out. So when you ask a group of people who are unfortunately in a leadership role, so this was our strata committee, and I like to make the reference to any leadership role because I believe my story resonates in so many sectors. So apartments, apartment blocks, the workplace, your community. When you ask such a simple question and then you are deemed a massive problem, that is a lack of emotional intelligence. You do not have the maturity to deal with something that is clearly underhanded. Because to ask such an innocent question and the response was a very well executed hate campaign against me, they knew what they were doing was wrong.
Yeah, sure.
Because the response was basically, if you want a pet, put in a bag like everybody else and shut up. Like, keep your mouth shut. I was called a stupid little brown girl who would be gone in a week because allegedly they had rid millionaires from this building. So I'd be a walk in a park. Uh, it was just coordinated over a lot of years, all because I asked that question. Now, this I had moved in when the building was about 18 years old. So for 18 years, the residents in this block were okay with this behavior because I had since learned going through it that I wasn't the first person to ask that question. I was, however, the first person who didn't back down because of the retaliation. And why I focus on bystanders wasn't because of that experience. started years before with my first boyfriend, who unfortunately, just trigger warning, it's domestic violence for anybody watching. He put me in hospital in a very public way. He abused me in public. People stared at me. I wasn't in a good way at all. And I just remember thinking not one person was going to approach me and say, do you want me to call somebody? Are you okay? Nothing. And I don't remember knowing or understanding the term bystander then. However, fast forward, when I was going through this situation, I was very well aware of bystander culture, and it's something that has always irritated me in the sense that we need to change it. Because, like I said earlier, I believe bystanders hold silent bystanders hold a lot of power, because going back to that story, the majority of the building knew what was going on and they knew it was wrong. Because they remained silent, the consensus was they agreed.
Yeah.
And that is thrown in your face every week. I cannot tell you, I had to hear the majority are against you. Why are you going up against the majority? Do you like being hated? You must, again, the controversial, you like making trouble. I didn't like any of that. I was simply asking a question. However, what they didn't know about me is I also detest bullying. And because of my previous experience, I understood the pattern of behavior when it came to abuse of power. And all I could see here was abuse of power. And it wasn't about pets. It wasn't about pets at all. It was about, who do you think you are challenging us? And that is just very, very bad and toxic culture, where the majority allowed it because nobody ever stood up to these people. So for me to come in their words, as a newcomer and question their authority, they felt very threatened, and they were going to do everything they possibly could to squash me. And they thought that I would sort of just disappear into the background really quickly, and that didn't happen. So things escalated from that point, and we did go to court, 3 court hearings, and yeah, it was, to anybody watching, it looked like a dog case. For me, it was not a dog case. This was about an extreme abuse of power, the systemic failings in our homes, which I take very seriously. And thankfully, at the end, and it was 5.5 years from the time I asked the question until I delivered that landmark case, it was 5.5 years, a lot of little hearings, but 3 big hearings, because I won the first time, they appealed, I lost, and then I took it to the highest court in New South Wales. They didn't believe I was going to take it that far because they had already judged me. And that's why I say to people, embrace being underestimated, because they took no time at all to understand who I was, to understand what my values were or what I stood for. All they saw was, oh, I'm guessing they did a little Google search, and she's just a singer. And I'm pretty sure that's the mentality when that man called me a stupid little brown girl and they had rid themselves of millionaires. So I'm playing this out. I can't prove the background to this, but I assume he's gone, oh, she's a singer. We'll get rid of her quite easily. They didn't understand that I have very strong project management background, that I am meticulous with detail. And again, I will not stand for bullying or harming of anybody. So allow yourself to be underestimated. It's a very powerful thing. Yeah.
I think that's something that we often think that we want to be seen and heard, and people don't understand us, but it can actually be, I want to say, like a superpower in many situations. And I think it every time you sort of tell that story, I keep saying in my head, so I'm just going to say it out loud. you're the right person in the right place at the right time. And that might seem strange, but you know, because of your beliefs, the way that you see the world, the how you see something, and your ability to stick with something. So when you explained that's like 5 6 years of, that's a lot. And I'm sure that cost you money as well, right? None of that was free, even in time and energy and stuff like that.
It cost a
um
lot more than finances, definitely.
yeah,
It was, it's the psychological abuse
yeah,
until this very day is probably the hardest aspect to digest,
yeah,
because you have complete strangers who hate you. And I don't use the word hate lightly. They hate you. This morning at the cafe that I go to, unfortunately, a lot of them have infiltrated my space. That was a very safe space for me. And they will go out of their way to agitate. And people think winning is the end of it. And
mm,
it's in some cases worse because they're now embarrassed. They didn't think this little person who, in their eyes, is totally beneath them could win against this superpower, because I wasn't only up against my building. This became very political. I had politicians who wouldn't help me. My local MP betrayed me and then took credit for my work. So the stakeholders that represent strata owners, like apartment owners, I was a member of, they actually teamed up with my building and then hired one of the state's most prominent lobbyists to fight against me. So I wasn't just up against my building, I was up against an establishment. And the imbalance of power was immense. And then to have complete strangers cast judgment purely on gossip, I thought, wow, this movie has been played many times before, and nobody has thought to just step back from it for a minute and think, well, hang on, logically, we know there are pets in this building. This is not a secret.
yeah,
People who had pets were abusing me because I was rocking the boat. Maybe you should go find somewhere else to live. You don't belong here. You're low class. This was on a weekly basis. I was spat on. I was shoulder charged by a woman, out of all people. And that's what I mean. I'll rephrase, when you have been through a violent relationship and you know the patterns of coercive control, that psychological abuse, and then the physical, I anticipated the acceleration of what was happening. Unfortunately, the police didn't care. They would, you know, come back when something else happened. And one of my last conversations was, are you waiting to find me in a ditch somewhere?
mm,
And that was when they were like, oh, that's a serious accusation or statement. And I'm thinking, have you not been paying attention? I turned up with video recordings, with audio recordings, emails of my committee, very derogatory against me, calling me a psychopath, um, vexatious for simply asking. I think I asked for a pamphlet to be distributed before the very first time I put a motion to change the bylaw, so people could try and understand where I was coming from. They would not distribute that pamphlet. And because I followed up, I was called all these names and they were putting it in writing. This was on email. And so I thought to myself, who am I dealing with here? This is not normal behavior. And so I go back to the point that for some reason, people are more comfortable to call you unstable than they are to call the system unstable. And that's a narrative that I'm very passionate about changing, because a crisis just doesn't happen overnight. It's rehearsed. It
yeah,
happens over thousands, if not millions, of what people deem small insignificant injustices that people tolerate or just don't have the energy to challenge until one day it becomes this crisis and people are like, oh, hang on a minute, this isn't right. How did this happen? Well, it's been happening for a long time. And when you have people like me along the way saying, hello, this isn't good, this is a problem, the harm isn't a problem, I become the problem
Yeah.
because I refuse to normalize this behavior. And so that's why I always come back to bystanders and trying to inspire them and educate them on how to use their voice and the power they have to actually change a narrative and avoid a crisis. Because in my case, if the majority of my neighbors stood up with me, this wouldn't have lasted a week, maybe a month at best, but it would not have been dragged through the courts, costing both sides a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of heartache. Like the culture in this building is still not good. They will present to people that we have a very successful vertical village. They like to use that term, but we don't. A lot of people have left.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, sorry, I get very passionate about
No,
that, but
no.
it's something that, yeah, sorry.
You have me engrossed. It's like my brain is thinking about so much. So I, I have you've caused me a problem because I've got so
Oh,
many questions to ask you, which is a great thing to
that's a
do to
good
me.
problem. Yeah.
Um, first of all, so when you were telling the story about how long it went on and all this sort of abuse, physical, people sending emails, being spat on, I wanted to ask this question, and I almost feel that I've answered it for myself, but I'll see what your response is. I was
Okay.
I was thinking when you come across that, that's a lot to take on, time, energy, the
Yeah.
abuse, things that you weren't expecting. So my question is, and I'll give you my answer, and then I'll be interested to hear yours. Um, uh, did at any point you think about giving up? And so my brain goes, absolutely not. That just drove her even more to get to the end. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And it is something I speak about quite a lot. Earlier you said I was the right person at the right time. I think that's inevitable. Bullies will eventually one day come across somebody who will not tolerate their behavior. It's inevitable. They may get away with it for a very long time, but somebody will come along and say, no, thank you, not today, not on my watch. And so that was just, unfortunately or fortunately, that timing that it came together and I was that person. I'd love to believe that at some point somebody else would have, although it had been 18 years. Uh, but when you say things like that to somebody like me, who's very firm on my values, my standards, they won't waver. I don't, it's not easy to lose things, as in um, relationships, friends, opportunities for standing up. But for me, it's a lot harder to deal with going to bed knowing that I'm turning a blind eye of something that's seriously wrong. And when you do abuse somebody like that, because I know there's a lot of people like me, there is, uh, that just adds fuel to the fire. All that does is make me want to right that wrong so much more. It doesn't deter me, it actually keeps me going. And it goes back again. Find out who you're opposing. Sit down and have a conversation. They would not even sit down and really talk to me. It was the first conversation I had was a threat. It was, if you go ahead with this motion, you'll become a target. And I shouldn't say a threat because that's exactly how it played out. I was a target. I am still a target. But in the sense of giving up, you get tired. You get tired. But to be honest, that doesn't hit you until afterwards. So when I won, it was a bittersweet victory. I was honored to be able to deliver an outcome that I knew has helped millions of Australians and has had impact on policy both nationally and globally. Very, very proud of that. But you're not popping a bottle of champagne.
Yeah.
It's a very mixed feeling. And the recovery and processing what had happened happens afterwards. And that's where you start to think, am I insane for taking that on? So I finished writing my book, which will be released in the next few months. That was probably the first time I acknowledged to myself what I had done, because you're just in survival. When it
Yeah.
gets to a point of real seriousness, you are literally just surviving the day, skimming the emails, seeing what you need to address. But writing the book, having to read the emails in depth, I put it away. When I first started writing it, I started and then I pushed it away because I didn't realize how traumatic it was. um, yeah, I do not want to get emotional, but the work comes later. Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the time, no, I didn't want to give up.
Yeah. Just
Long,
on
long
that
answer.
no, it's amazing. I love the way that you see all of this and you can explain it. And I was just thinking, as you said, you were writing the book. Um, was that almost therapy for you in a way, like going back and actually realizing and did that do? I can understand it emotional, but I've often felt that we feel emotions or when we suppress emotions, they show up in our body and, like in illness or we get something that's out of the blue. And I wondered, what you've had to endure that, like, for something so simple, like you say, asking a question. And it wasn't, and this comes back to, the first compliment I've had. You're not this type of person that's, I'm looking for a fight at every angle or something like that. It was just like, hang on, everyone's got these pets in here. We've got this law that just looks really outdated. Why don't we just make it easy? And then to have pretty much, I would imagine, your life turned upside down. And for me, a home is a very safe space. It's the place
Correct.
where I can close the door and um, you can shut away all your problems. And although you can shut your door, the minute you almost open your door, you're reminded of that. There's no real space in between. You have to walk down the halls and people are doing these things. And that is a hell of a lot to endure, just in itself, but over a prolonged amount of time. And did you feel like, so if when you were explaining that, I was like, oh, okay, you're going along, not going along with it, but your body's like, yep, this is absolutely what I'm going to do. And then I was just wondering, at the end of that, did anything sort of show up, like emotions? And obviously the book seems like it would be a good way to process some of that information that you couldn't do at the time. But it's also, that's quite hard, right? You have to take 5 years and almost condense it and look at it and process it. That's like reliving it again, but
Yeah,
in a
that
much deeper thing. And yeah, that's
that was
that's a
it,
lot.
it it was a lot. And I think that's why when I first started writing it, I pushed it away because I was quite shocked about how it made me feel. And I wasn't anticipating that because even though you I'm resilient. I know that about myself. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how resilient you are. It doesn't matter how strong you think you may be. Like you said, your body does it holds on to that. And again, it comes back to that psychological abuse. That to me, I think is something that I will find hard to process for a very long time. Writing the book came in waves. So it was really cathartic to get it out and to have
Mm,
it written. And then it was really heavy having to read and listen. I was recording. I had my phone on record every time I walked out of my house, out of my door, and every time I entered the building, just for protection. And so watching those videos, the audio in meetings, I would record the meetings again, because our minutes of the meeting never reflected what happened in the meeting. So I have all this audio, and at one point I was listening to a 30-minute meeting, and I said to my husband, my body went straight back to that seat. When
Wow.
when I when I stopped the recording, I did a gasp, and I thought, oh wow, where did I go? And I went straight back to that meeting. And so your body, it holds on to that, and that takes a lot of work to get rid of. And I'm still in that process, unfortunately, 5 years on. But that's because, like I said, you win. It took another year before I was still lobbying government to make sure they legislated it, and that they had no choice at this point. They had to legislate my judgment, because I was fighting for property rights. Again, people were, they thought I was fighting for just my dog. And so property rights, we already had them in place. So strata was definitely overstepping. The government had to legislate, and they could have actually saved me and done this years prior and saved me the trauma. And that's why I'm writing the book. It's a systemic issue. These politicians knew I was writing to them every chance I got, and not just one politician. I was reaching out to everybody, the Attorney General. I was including the videos of my abuse, the emails. They knew. Nobody did a thing. Nobody did a thing. And so that's why I say people who do nothing, regardless if it's politicians, stakeholders, academics, academics write about this, but there were many who wanted to be involved at the end to take credit and write about it, but they could have teamed up with other lawyers and taken on this case. They didn't do that. So there are a lot of people who are sitting back. They don't think they're part of the harm, but them doing nothing or simply just writing about it, all they do is prolong that harm. They allow that harm to survive. And those politicians just watching, they have a lot to answer for, because you can't simply watch one woman take on this establishment and think that that's okay. And the fact that it actually was allowed to get to that level, somebody somewhere should have said, this needs to stop. And they didn't. And so that's why I talk about the systemic issues and bystander culture on multiple levels.
I was just thinking as you were saying that, as you say, people were joining towards the end, and I think something in my head says they joined in the end because they had a feeling that they would look good at the end.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's
self-preservation.
and so with all of this, I'm trying to understand or trying to think about what's actually going on, because this people in power, it's so strange, isn't it? When I am the last person that wants power. I have
Yeah.
zero interest in power. I almost want to live in a unicorn world where just everybody
Yeah,
gets along. And
I
I know that
understand that.
I know that's not a reality. I have no desire to be influential in a way. I want people to live how they want to live. So when things like power come along, I'm like, but why? I want, as long as things are done for good purpose and to help people, great. But when someone feels threatened about their power, they in my head that says they must feel so insecure about
Bingo.
that, and they're using all of these resources over something, there must be something deeply ingrained in them that they need to do all of this. And like you say, just when you think about how crazy the actual thing is, it's not like you were saying, I'm the only one in this whole building that wants a pet. It's like, hang on, there's pets all over. We
There's
know it. It's
pets
just
already in here.
And you go, yeah, it just makes logical sense. But just to sit down and what is those insecurities about those people that I guess they've got to a position of power because they've craved it maybe
Their
because of
entire
some of those
life.
yeah, and that insecurity. And so, but it's really strange because they've created this power that is almost an illusion in many
It
ways
is an illusion. Yeah.
because it can be like rocks anyway, but they think that that's created some safety for them. And I think if they were more aware of themselves, they could maybe relate to you a lot better because you go, okay, this is just a conversation. It's not a threat, and you know what. But it's strange because as you explained, this doesn't just extend to your building, the people in your
No.
building. It's like politicians, etc. And uh, and I think it's very so. If I say I don't want to get into the politics side of it, it's just because I know so little about politics. I would be out of my depth within about 10 seconds. But my general opinion of um, politicians is that they do things to sort of win favour, not
Oh,
because it's the
absolutely.
right thing to do. And
Absolutely.
I see that. I would say, you know, the little I know about the UK politics, and it's just like, okay, so then we can secure my job for the next 4 or however long years.
Yeah.
But I think I would much rather say, okay, I did something really good, and almost that be a legacy. And it doesn't matter if no one remembers that, and it's not for the glory. But you go, uh, you have a power if you're in politics to change things, and I'm sure there's a lot more that goes on that I have no
Yeah.
understanding. But wouldn't it be amazing to go, yeah, okay, I didn't carry on my job after that term, or I got fired, but look, I made things better for humanity or those people in that space, and that feels so much better than going, yeah, I've secured a job. And it's really strange because, and again, it seems that everybody's frightened, and I am the first one to say that that's me. I'm frightened of, I don't know, so much stuff. Some at one point years ago, I said I'm just frightened of life, and that seems really weird. I was just frightened of meeting people, of afraid of not knowing what the future is, and that can be a very. And I was like, I'm an adult. Like, it was almost like I was thinking in a child's brain, and it was very. And I was like, oh yeah, I was afraid to go out socially, and it wasn't anxiety necessarily. I was just like, and I don't know why that was. And I think a lot. I'm a lot better now, and that starts with small, confident pieces. But I'm wondering, in all of what you've said, you've said people don't want to change, and is it a fear? Is it security? As in, it's you know, we have this there's this Stockholm syndrome, you know, where like
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
kidnaps someone, but then they can't go because they've created this safety. It's a whole load of psychological things there, but I think I don't know, uh, and I'm not great in expressing emotions or understanding what they are. But for you, like, I think fear is one of those things. What else did you see come out, and what can you either interpret or what did you experience?
So let's go back to their claim of the majority to try and put pieces together. I had to listen to the majority, the majority, the majority don't want this, the majority don't want this. When I won and the law had spoken, so now everybody's like, okay, this is the highest court, the law has passed judgment. We then had to vote on a pet-friendly bylaw. Do you know how many people voted for what was essentially my draft of a pet-friendly bylaw?
No, go on.
99.4% of the 60% who turned up. It was the largest turnout out of, I think I put 3 motions in and they all failed early on. again, because the majority did not turn up. They never received more than 50% votes in general. But again, they would throw the majority are against you. It's a form of psychological abuse to wear me down and make me think I was very alone. But at the end, the truth, as I knew it to be, showed in the numbers. Some of those people absolutely had fear of voting with me. I had so many people say, I, I support what you're doing, but I don't want to get involved. And I would say, but you are involved. By staying silent, all you're doing is allowing them to get away with this. Others would blatantly say, I'm not going to, fall out with X, Y, and Z person. One of them was my local MP. This building has a very strong attachment with my local MP, which is ethically not sound. And so I put it into different sectors. You do have the people that are fearful, may not understand how to speak up and support. And I'm okay with those people because you can inspire them, you can educate them. And that's why I founded The Good Warrior, especially for that reason, amongst others. Then you have the people who simply they just will not side with you. Like I said, people with pets were against me. They physically voted against me, abused me, swore at me. And those people, all they were doing was preserving their self-interests.
Mm.
Those type of bystanders I have no time for because they actively allow abuse, if they like to admit it or not. They actively allow it just so they can get ahead.
Yeah.
I can't focus on them. But the ones that have fear, it's been a lot of years, and I have spoken and conducted workshops, and I have a huge community who still will not, how do I say it, support my social pages, but you'll find them in my private messages. Because society has normalized crucifying people like me. And so people want to reach out to me because what I've done and how I can help them, but they don't necessarily want to be seen supporting me or needing me. And that's such a great shame because it's detrimental to me and my livelihood, but it's so much worse for the majority of people out there who do need people to inspire and educate them. And again, that is why I'm so passionate about changing this narrative, because it's not a new narrative. This has happened throughout history on smaller scales, bigger scales. The same thing plays out. Somebody puts their head up, asks why is there an injustice over here? The people you're asking are like, oh, don't ask us anything. We're the powers of that be, and we will not be questioned. And then you have the silent majority who just sitting over here going, oh, we're not getting involved. And they're the ones that need to get involved. And I always say, because I'll have people say to me, I'm all for change. You can't stop progress. I have no idea and I have no interest in leading change. Sure, you don't have to lead change. Not everybody's the same, but we do have a duty to go and support people who are leading change because we can't simply just wish for change.
Yeah. And
And
hope it
be
turns up, right?
oblivious. Yeah, hope it just appears one day and then crucify the person that steps up and says, actually, yeah, I think this needs to change. That the script has to be changed for more of us to speak up, because all it does is it deters people, and that is part of the strategy. I've been made an example of, and people were not going to put themselves in that position to be abused every day they simply walk out of their apartment. People don't want that. And I definitely don't want that. But again, it's what level of discomfort are you willing to put up with?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
is it the discomfort of watching an injustice and doing nothing about it? Or is it the discomfort of betraying what you stand for?
Yeah. It's it's quite interesting to understand exactly how that's playing out in people's minds, and you can't necessarily think that everyone's the same, or
No,
and why
no.
people are doing that. So, but I was thinking, about your story about the physical abuse when you were younger with your boyfriend. That that seems, well, it just sort of popped up in my mind. I'm like, why did no one step in? Were they worried for their physical well-being that they were going to be beaten up, or uh,
That
but
one was a strange one because he had already driven off. So I was there by
oh,
myself.
what?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why that stood out to me. That's such it's such a formative time in my life because I was I should have been more shocked about what happened to me, and I was, but I was glued to just looking at these people's in different eyes. Because I know me, and again, not everybody's the same, but I know that if I see something until today, and I don't recommend for everybody, obviously, you should watch your surrounds and see if it's safe to do so. But I am one of those reactive people. If I see somebody being abused in the street, I was like this at school, I would jump right in. And so I'm sitting there thinking, nobody's going to help me. Like my dress was ripped. I was not in a good way. And I had to really get myself up and cover myself as best as I could. And people were watching. And that question came up like that the threat was not around. He had driven off,
Yeah,
but nobody was coming. And bystander culture is very much that. If there was just one person, I probably had a better chance of them coming up to me. But when there is a group of people, it's this disbursement of responsibility. Oh, well, someone else is surely they're gonna step in,
yeah,
and then nobody does.
yeah. But uh, like something says in me that like there must. So I can understand it because I read about that, the sort of group mentality.
Yeah.
But then I'm trying to think there must there must be something internal that is greater than that, that like caring for other people, that outweighs that. Just that sort of, we have this card game called Trumps. I don't know if you've ever played it. You have a card and it
So,
trumps that. So anyway, but like like that psychological group thing. Oh, someone else is going to do it, etc. But there must. It seems odd to me that within people, because oftentimes people say, "Oh, the world's going to crap," or
crap.
whatever, and yeah, I want to use a stronger word, but
Yeah.
and I can understand that, and it seems that the world is very, very insular, and we're very lonely, and we think about ourselves too much. Again, no judgment. I've been there, etc. It's I understand, but I genuinely believe I'm not really a consumer of news. I don't like it because it's very negatively swayed, and
Yeah.
the reality most of the time is it's positive. People are good. People do think, do care, etc. And it might be hidden under different layers of something. So it's just odd in that scenario that you go, that caring is like almost like a basic part of who we are as humans. We're there to protect and support and love each other, right? And so
Yeah.
people having this
I believe that for
bystander
a very
thing,
long time.
yeah, but it's odd. It doesn't. It's my brain is struggling with that concept, but you've experienced that, and it's. Well,
And
but
that is something. So I go through the same, exactly what you just went through, trying to process it, trying to make sense of it. And somebody said something to me really powerful. They said, stop trying to understand it because your
okay,
brain doesn't work that way. You will never understand it. And I remember growing up, my parents were very strong on do what's right, not what's easy. We that was drilled into us. If you can help somebody, you help them. You don't need anything in return. And so, my father was very selfless, my mother's very selfless. and values were a big thing. So for a long time, I truly believed people wanted to help each other. People wanted to see each other succeed. I can't remember the moment that reality was shattered for me. It was many years ago, but I remember when it was, I was in absolute shock because I thought, oh, hang on a minute. I'm not like I don't understand that. If I could help somebody, I'll help some. It doesn't take anything away from me. And I just went through this spiral of not understanding how what I believed humans we're born to naturally assist each other and make life better, not just for ourselves, but for the community around us. Because I have this strong belief that we are all connected, if we like it or not, we are. But unfortunately, I think along the way somewhere that has been lost. And I don't want to say that I believe the majority of silent bystanders are bad people. I don't believe that. But I don't think they realize that the harm that they allow to continue. And I think once they are educated about that and they understand that better, if they then choose to continue to allow that harm, I don't care if it's one person or 10, they really need to look in the mirror. But I don't think I'll ever understand it fully because we're not wired that way. And that was the best thing somebody could tell me, because I would seriously sit down and try to understand. And hypocrisy is another thing that drives me wild. And that was like, here is how people with pets abusing me. This makes no sense. But again, it wasn't about pets. And that's why I try to tell people that hear my story for the first time, they look at me really strangely. And they're like, this sounds really out of proportion. And so my first thing is, okay, remove the scenario that this is a question about a dog. It's much bigger than that. It's about a systemic power play, and people are just drunk on control. And I do believe it's their own insecurities. They have no self-awareness, because if you are self-aware, like you were describing what politicians should do, I haven't met a politician who has any self-awareness or any moral compass, to be honest. And when you are wired that way, I just don't think emotional IQ is really there for you to be able to try and empathize with somebody else's point of view.
Yeah, it's uh, as you were saying that about emotional intelligence, something that kind of comes back time and again. I have conversations about the education system. You know, it's not specific just to one country. I think it exists everywhere, and I think you know, I'm not just limiting this to children. You know, your story resonates. You know, for all ages. You know, it doesn't
Oh,
discriminate,
completely.
etc. But I think things like emotional intelligence, understanding emotions, social skills and things like that. We don't teach those things in school. We teach maths, English, science, and stuff like that. Um, and I come across a few people that really sort of understand that. Understanding what that means at a deeper level, not just you know, not just understanding what emotional intelligence is, but how that actually weaves into society, your day-to-day decisions, and what's going on. And we don't do that. And again, we seem to have gone more insular. We're more connected than ever before, but we're happy to sit behind our screens than go out and have a conversation and understand
Oh,
someone. And I think for the kids, it's really important, and again, it's not all on the kids to change the world.
no,
I'm
no,
not
I
saying
understand what
that,
you're
but I,
saying. Yeah.
I think we have a responsibility to, we understand ourselves much more. We understand how our brains work and function than we've ever done before, but we've never brought that into the modern day teaching and education and things like that. And that won't solve all problems, but it will, if we rethink how, we learn and we process information, and we're all different. We I understand it's useful to put people into sort of buckets or things, classify them, a general thing. And I think the danger sometimes is that we classify too simply.
Too
That,
much, yeah.
yeah, there's a bit, there's so much going on for everyone. Our background, our history, our beliefs, everything goes into who we are, and no one's the same. And people go, oh, but we are all unique, but we do share characteristics. We do, there are fundamentals about how we are as human beings. And I think if we focus on that and allow that to fall into the education system, and what not just, oh yeah, everything's rosy, but if you don't do that, what's the outcome and how these things sort of play out. I really think that that is an important part, and I think it would help, in the long term, and young, not only for the youngsters, but actually for the people teaching it, because we've got to learn that for ourselves. We might think about it. Even me saying it, it's a theory, but what does that actually mean in practice? And when you do things in practice, they embed in, and they're not quite as you thought about them. And I've thought about everything that you've said, and when you said about this isn't simply a case about a dog in an apartment, and it's, I think it's a blessing and a curse, because it's maybe
Yeah,
gets
completely.
a lot of attention, and it seems so extreme based on, okay, it's a pet in a building, but it actually highlights, like you said, this huge systemic problem that we have in
Issue.
culture. Yeah, exactly. And I was also, I've never experienced anything like you have, but I hear a lot about sort of the workplace, and
Yeah,
and it's such an easy parallel to make,
it's the same
because
scenario. Same
yeah,
scenario.
exactly, it's the same thing, just replace dog with company, or what.
Whatever. It could be the dog was the catalyst, he was the excuse. It could be
Yeah,
anything. It doesn't matter. And that's what we need to change and to teach and educate is how do you react to being called out? How
mm,
do you react around, accountability, transparency? If you're not comfortable with those things, you should not be in a leadership position at all. And for children, I've been asked this before because I focus a lot on adult bullying. I will use that term more than bullying in schools. And that's because I don't believe we are born malicious. I mean, there are some exceptions, I'm sure. I don't believe it's a behavior that's inherent to human beings. And so when children bully, it's a taught behavior.
yeah,
And I tell you, some of the behavior of these adults, I'm glad they weren't my parents. And then you wonder what their children are like.
yeah,
We can't, you said it earlier, I think before we went live, you were shocked at how some scenario where your child was imitating you by default without you realizing. And that is exactly the same thing. Children watch more than people realize. They watch and they observe what is acceptable. And that's why I say to people, the people that were up against me were, well, they're principals, associate professors, CEOs, lawyers. These aren't people that, they have positions of power, some with profile. Those individuals have said some of the most stupidest things to me. And you think, how are you in your workplace? And
yeah,
then the other fascinating thing is they believe their behavior here would never cross over with their professional environment. And in a few cases they have. And guess who they took that anger out on? Whose fault was that? It was my fault. And that's why I come back to if you claim to have values and standards, but they're not applied equally. You should be the same person wherever you are. If you do not
Yeah.
apply them equally, you don't have values nor standards. You have an agenda.
Yes.
And that will be exposed somewhere along the line. And so people need to really be mindful of that. You can't treat somebody poorly because you think it's one person and then
Yeah.
go out into the world and present like, you know, a pillar of the community. It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Honestly, it's such a fascinating subject. I know, obviously, it's caused you, you know, a long journey, and there's a lot behind it. But that point, as you said, this reflection of my kids mirror my behavior, and knowing how I am as a parent, I think when I had kids, I thought about myself a lot before then. And then something weird happens when you have children, and it's just you are replaced with your kids. It's just you would do the best for your kids. And I think we sometimes get that around the wrong way. We sort of would do everything for them, not for us. And so it's easier to do something also for them to whatever it is. But I've actually used it the other way around. And if I want the best for my children, then I need the best for myself, and that
Yeah.
comes down to an awareness. And again, I don't know why these visions or images keep coming up. So I went shopping recently, and I'm not trying to like paint myself as a saint or anything. I'm really, really not. But it's
Please
just a
do.
simple, yeah. So we came out of the shopping, and there was a homeless guy sitting outside one of the shops, and it caused no harm or anything. He was nice. He's there quite regularly, and we had this shopping trolley, and we brought fruit and loads of other stuff. And people have this expectation that they just want money for drugs or something like that, which is really wrong. You've taken no time to understand that person. And again, I'm that person. I would walk past them. But if I can just stop myself for a moment and just go, that person's there. And what I actually did is I reached into the bag, and I got like a pack of raspberries, which are quite expensive in this country, but
Yeah.
that's irrelevant. But I gave it to the kids to go and give to the gentleman. But I wanted them to understand that it was okay, it was safe, I was there, they're not going to come into harm, but also what that feeling of giving to someone is. And so I did that with the kids. There's part of me that wanted to feel good about myself, don't get me wrong. In there is like, okay, yeah, I'm showing my kids something. I went on my own without the kids at some point, and I did the same thing. And it's not something that I would have done before, but we can change that behavior. If we can just pause for a second, just think about something. If I had some money, maybe I could have given money, but I thought, it's getting a bit cold here. He needs maybe some health. I'd give him some fruit. He can eat that. We can do so much more.
Completely, we can.
We just need to create that pause and go, well, I have a default behavior. My default behavior would just go, I might say hello, but just walk on past. But actually stopping and seeing people, seeing maybe what's going on. Honestly, the smile this guy gave us, like, he just felt seen.
Priceless.
And you just go, wow, maybe like, and you're giving him good food for nourishment. And just, I'm sure he's an amazing guy. I can't. The challenge I have here is that I don't speak the local language and stuff like that. And maybe I use that as an excuse not to sort of engage. But there's so much going on.
But you did something. You did something.
Yeah,
so
in your case, you did something and it turned out to be this major thing. But change doesn't need to be major all the time. Doesn't need to be this huge thing.
Not at all.
It can start with this simplest thing. And I want to tie that back to you and what you're doing, because it's about educating and explaining to bystanders you have the power. And it's really interesting what you say. By saying nothing, you're actually saying something.
You're
You
saying
know,
so much.
yeah, and just understanding that behavior actually has an effect, and you can change that by doing something. It doesn't need to be the biggest thing. It can just be, oh, are you okay? Or, and it can start with that. But that smallest thing can, sort of build, compound. Your children can see it. Maybe they're a bit more compassionate. They can see those things. And it's not with that, I've got to get there, but start small. And if everything else is scary, the smallest thing might feel a bit scary, but it feels a bit safer. Try that way, and then that can lead to amazing things. That's a long-winded way of
No, but
saying things.
you are 100% on the right path, because my call to action at the end of most talking engagements is I invite people to understand the stance they're taking, because every day, every single day, probably multiple times a day, we have a choice about who we are, what role we play, not just in our lives, but in the lives of complete strangers. How many interactions do we have a day? Do you want to be a passive person in this life? Or do you want to be a builder of a better system, a better community? And I always say, I'll repeat this till I'm blue, do not outsource your thinking. It is the most dangerous thing you can do. And people will just, in my case, the best example is I was asking for proxies. So you didn't even have to turn up to the meeting. Just give me a piece of paper with a little tick saying that you support what I'm doing. People couldn't do that. They couldn't do that. You have a choice to make every day. And
Mhm.
what role you play and the decisions you make, if you think by making no decision that that's not a decision, you're sorely mistaken. And so don't ever focus on the person that's calling out the issue. Look at the issue first and maybe educate yourself. And then you may start to put the pieces together, because it's way easier. I think I said this earlier. It's way easier to call the person who's asking the questions. They're a bit crazy. They're a bit unstable, but they're
Yeah,
not looking at the system that's actually caused the problem in the first place. So we
yeah,
all have a role to play. And like I said, it's a small things that if they are challenged early enough, they may not become such a big mountain to climb.
yeah. I think uh, I think in terms of our life on this planet, it's not always about legacy and things like that, but it's just about not being decent, but we can
It is
do so
about
much
being
more.
decent.
Well, yeah, but but there's so much more, and like you say, we outsource our thinking. I think we get caught in this system of default behavior, and again, most of this stuff didn't happen overnight. It's just, oh, okay, it was this one decision, I overlooked it, okay, that's fine. Then it's another one, then it's another one, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes this thing. And to unwind that, sometimes, yes, you absolutely need big decisions to shock people, to go, oh, Jesus. But
Yeah.
also, I think it can start from, just unwinding that. Okay, don't let that go. Just, okay, be aware of what I'm doing. Okay, stop. Actually, no, that's not okay. And I think, again, when you were saying, look at the system, but it's easier to point at you. And I think oftentimes people like to go, oh, look over there, because if you look
Problem
over there,
child.
yeah, you're not looking at me. It's not, you're not
Correct.
me. It's that, and
Yeah.
it's much easier to do that. That's a short-term thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Long-term thinking is, oh, how can I feel better about myself? And I've had conversations about kindness and things like that on these lives, and I understand some people might not land with that, but I think it's genuine. If you think of a place of kindness to yourself, and that doesn't mean selfish, just, okay, how can I do that? And if you can't do that, kindness to someone else, because kindness to someone else
His
also
kindness
reflects
to
back to
you.
you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's one of these things that uh, I've talked about it. I've done something so simple, it was ridiculous. I felt amazing. Like my day for the rest of the day was amazing. It got me out of this funk. So you can immediately change your state, the way that you're thinking about something, by doing something kind. And that kindness doesn't need to be this grand gesture that we're
Not at
waiting for this
all.
thing. And I
Not at
think
all.
doing those things can lead to so much, and bring awareness, start to think, give some pause to, oh, okay, no, actually, I'd like to change that. And again, just to sort of tie it up, because I'm quite conscious, I think we
Yeah.
could again talk all day, but and then you sort of have that understanding, and you're not just a single bystander, you're a group of
You're a
bystanders, and
group.
you can change it, and you can go, oh, okay, yeah, 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 let's go. And you, like you said, you have so much power as a bystander. We overlook it, but if you are aware of actually what you can do, just like you said, by simple ticking a box for a proxy,
Yeah.
wow, you know
Just
that, like,
just telling somebody you support them.
yeah,
The hate is loud. Hate is very loud, it's very active. So if you see somebody doing something you agree with, reach out to them. Because I can tell you it didn't happen often, but when it did, it definitely kept me going. It definitely kept me going because it's very lonely. And that I'm not saying that from a sympathetic point of view. I was going regardless.
yeah,
But it is a very lonely journey, regardless of the fact I have a very supportive husband, very lucky. And I started off with one neighbor supporting me. I ended up with a maybe 12, I think. It wasn't a lot. Each time until this day, if I'm at an event or somewhere and somebody introduces me and the topic comes up as it does, and somebody will go, "Oh, I was following along. Oh my God, I was really rooting for you. I was hoping you'd win." It's like, you should have reached out. And they sort of go, "Oh." And we get into the conversation. And it's amazing because people will say, "I never thought of it that way." It's like I was getting barraged with hate messages, mail in my mailbox. So if you get that, that little encouragement of totally support what you're doing. It's just that little antidote to the majority hate you. And although that's not true, when it's said to you on a daily, weekly basis, it's heavy. And so I do encourage people, you don't have to lead change. No one's saying that. I'm certainly not asking people to get up there and turn their life upside down. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking people not to be so tolerant of injustice, regardless of how small it may present itself, because that's
yeah,
what leads to big things.
yeah. I think that's such an amazing statement to sort of end things on. I think if people can take that away, I think that's brilliant. Um, Joe, honestly, this conversation was amazing. It gave me pause to think about myself and my actions, which I think is really powerful. So thank you very much
That's
for
all I
that.
can ask. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad.
And again, I'm glad that I had this opportunity to have this conversation because,
Likewise.
like I said in the beginning, I think we can misunderstand, and we should take the time to explore things. And we can assume, and often assumptions are just our projection on a situation. And it you've you bring so much light and so much joy. I'm sorry for all of the things that you've had to go through. I really am. At the same time, I am glad, and that sounds horrible, but I
No, I
think
understand what you're saying. I
you're the
understand
right
what you're saying.
person, and being able to share it, and not only just share it, oh, this is my story, but do it with your way of seeing the world. I think that's amazing because and I know it's not easy. I know you got support now and you didn't have support during, and you shouldn't have had to have gone through that. No one should go through that. But you have the skills and the ability to share your story that doesn't have to happen to as many people going
That's
forward.
my
And I
hope.
think,
Yeah,
yeah, and
that's my hope.
honestly, when does this book come out? Because I'm buying it. I'm going to read it.
Thank you. I will announce a date by the end of the month, early
Okay,
February, but it will be the first quarter.
Fantastic. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot more in there, um, not just the words. I think there's a lot probably in between those words that we need to
Yeah,
understand.
a lot of lessons. I hope a lot of reflection. I'm not naive to think that the government will read it and do something about it, but my goal and my hope is that they do look into some sort of inquiry into apartment living, because it's only growing, and the amount of people that reach out to me every week, the stories are horrific, and I don't believe people should be living under those circumstances in their most precious space, which is home.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's hope so. So, um, right. So I always say, where's the best place for people to find you? I found you on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn,
Where?
yeah, LinkedIn's
Okay.
good. My
Okay.
website, thegoodwarrior.com.au. LinkedIn's really good if you want me there. My email is there. My email's all out for people to contact me. Yeah, but that's the best place to find
And
me.
where will you be promoting the book? Will that be on your website or will that be on
Everywhere.
LinkedIn? Okay.
Website, LinkedIn. Yeah, it will be obvious.
Okay. I'm glad. I'm truly glad. But for today, thank you. This was such a pleasure. It's so great to get to know you just even a tiny bit better. I think there's
Thank you.
much more that we
Likewise.
could explore about you. But for today, really, really thought provoking. And I think that's an amazing
All we
thing
can
to
ask of
achieve.
each other, isn't it? The
Yeah.
thought-provoking. Let's
Yeah.
go away and ask ourselves some questions.
Absolutely. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, Joe. I
Thanks
really
for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Maybe we have a round two. Maybe there's some questions from the audience
Maybe.
and we can do that.
Maybe.
Yeah. Lovely.
No
All right.
worries.
Fantastic.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much,
Joe.
Colin. See ya. Bye.
Bye.